And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your still chilly Saturday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Another dual, D-U-A-L, not D-U-E-L, episode. Today is the 31st anniversary of the United States release of what I believe to be perhaps the most slept on suspense thriller, serial killer thriller, slasher film, nearly X-rated movie that I can think of. Certainly more so even than the following year's Jade, the William Friedkin film with Linda Fiorentino and Chaz Palminteri, which is, spoiler alert, not very good. But this movie, I think, is terrific. Got reviews and bombed at the box office at a time of year where it probably should have done well, given the fact that it was a quality release. There was even some, as crazy as it seems, some talk that maybe there would be some Oscar buzz for its lead actress. It was released in a few theaters in late 93. In fact, some places say that it's a 1993 film and others list it as 1994. But the movie is the great Michael Apted's. Michael Apted did the Up documentaries, which is, it's way beyond the scope of me summing it up in 30 seconds. You could Google it. It was a series of documentaries in brief, following the same group of people every 7 years of their lives. But this movie is called Blink. Nothing to do with Blink Twice, but it's just a very interesting way of telling a story. It mixes a lot of different genres without doing it in a way that is off-putting. And that sort of thing can be. At least I have seen films that try to blend comedy and horror and don't get the tone right. This has so many different genres going on at once, but to me, it does not take a bad step. Thanks not only to the fact that Michael Apted is a terrific filmmaker, but he cast two very dependable actors in the central roles, in Aidan Quinn and the star of the film, who was a pretty big star, virtually on the A-list in this particular era, Madeleine Stowe. The movie is about a musician, a violinist named Emma, played by Madeleine Stowe, and as the film opens, she is blind. Hence the title, Blink, but she is blind. But she has a very particular kind of blindness where, and here's a bit of a postmodern sci-fi angle, a certain new and radical surgery might be able to restore her sight. She lost the power of sight when she was 8. Needless to say, she has the surgery and she starts to see, but her vision is still somewhat impaired, where she will see something, not remember it, and then get hit by fragments of memories. In the world of this film, she may or may not have witnessed a murder, which turns out to be the first in a string of serial killings. When this film was being promoted, there was a famous gossip columnist who was a huge movie fan. She worked for Newsday, among other publications, named Liz Smith. Liz Smith had certain people in Hollywood whom she absolutely adored. And I should point out, for a gossip columnist, she was not trashy and she didn't like ragging on anyone. She just liked to spread cheer and spread gossip. She had seen an she saw this film in an advanced screening. And if you actually were to Google and check out what she said about it, because she's not a movie critic, she thought it was one of the best films. Like, she was so over the moon with how much she loved the movie. She loved the suspense. She thought it worked as a horror movie, and the romance angle, which you might say is a series of sex scenes angle between the two very attractive leads in Aidan Quinn and Madeleine Stowe. She couldn't believe they got away with what they got away with in this film. I don't know how this didn't get an NC-17 rating, is what I'm saying. It is way out there, way more graphic than Basic Instinct's, not even close. Basic Instinct is practically PG-13 compared to what they do in this movie. The film is set in Chicago, and as I've talked about before, when you have a filmmaker who knows how to use the location, to not simply throw scenes together and, oh yeah, it looks like they're in Chicago, but to make the spirit of the city at the time in which the movie was made, to make that another character. That's what you're able to do with the city of Chicago. You know, it's cold in the winter and everything like that. You get little bits with Cubs fans and whatnot. The way that Aidan Quinn's detective meets the character of Emma, the main character, is gold. She's playing with her band. She's a violinist and she has a band. And I think it was a real band called the Drovers. They play some really good music in this movie. So he does not know her. He just knows she's gorgeous. And he makes a bet. He's just with his friends. It's kind of a classic guy's locker room kind of thing, although doesn't say anything defamatory, but this is the way that it's presented in the film. So he is in a bar and she's playing violin with this band. And he makes a bet with his friends. I'll bet you $20 that I'm going to know this woman, meaning I'm going to get a smile out of her. I think it was, I'm going to get a smile out of her. So he starts dancing and he starts taking his clothes off, and the bar is going crazy. The band is into it, and she's not reacting. And at this point in the film, I don't know that the audience would even be aware of why she's not reacting. I'm not sure the timing of this particular scene, but he doesn't know that she's blind. So he does this striptease, and apparently he gets just about entirely naked, and she still doesn't smile because she can't see him. She can hear that people are hooting and hollering, and women are really laughing, but we then see her eyes, and oh, geez, okay, this woman is blind. But the follow-up to that, the movie goes out of its way to present her in this scene as somebody who almost would be above such things as a guy flirting outrageously and inappropriately, desperate to try to get her phone number or have his way with her, or however you want to phrase it. It's not really important. She seems like somebody who is concerned with other things than that. But when we pick up after this sequence where Aidan Quinn's character humiliates himself, but he does it with such style and such panache, we almost kind of start rooting for him, even though he's a bore. He comes across as not particularly likable in this scene, the way that he's talking in general. But the way that Madeline Stowe plays the next scene is really, really good, because she surprised me. I wasn't expecting what ended up happening, which is she says words to the effect of what was going on during that song, and then she said, well, there was a guy who I think was trying to get your attention. He gave us a big old anatomy lesson. I don't need to explain what that means. You can figure it out for yourself. He gave us a big old anatomy lesson. And my expectation would have been that the character of Emma maybe would have chuckled a little bit, but not had any other reaction. But instead, Madeline Stowe seems to get a little bit out of breath, and her mouth gets a little bit wide as if in shock, and she goes, "How big?" How big? Wow. Well, the story very quickly takes the form of a serial killer film. What appears to be a random murder is actually not a random murder. There is a serial killer doing very, very horrible shit in and around Chicago. And Aidan Quinn, as a detective, a local detective, is assigned to the case. And this is when Madeline's character of Emma has the surgery, and she thinks she sees the killer, but she's not sure. And as Aidan Quinn investigates, as it looks like this is getting worse, they start having sex. Now, if you want to say they start a romance, it feels like a stretch. It feels like they just start having sex. So you have the romance angle, if you want to call it that. But where I think this film scores hugely, that's what she said, but where this film scores hugely, it does something you're not expecting. You have the serial killer elements a la Seven. You have the woman in danger elements that we've seen in a lot of these kinds of movies. But you also have people having endless sex when their lives are in danger. So this movie, as the serial killer, appears to be closing in on our intrepid heroes. They're not looking for help. Aidan Quinn is not really doing that much in the way of detective work. He's too busy having sex with this gorgeous woman. And she's too busy becoming incredibly, obsessively into him, where she's basically telling him, we might just be fucking, but I want more, just so you know. And he's almost like, oh, all right then. All right then, as Billy Bob Thornton says in Sling Blade. So that has the elements of the Dead Teenager movies. Remember the Dead Teenager movies? Friday the 13th, Halloween after the first one, Nightmare on Elm Street. The Dead Teenager movies. It means everyone's dying. All of our friends are dying. In this case, people in the surrounding area are getting bumped off by a serial killer. Everyone's dying. Let's not even make an attempt to go for help. Let's just take all of our clothes off and go skinny dipping. It's actually quite humorous when you look at this movie and say, yeah, it kind of has the elements of a slasher film, and the fact that they're having sex at a time where, bro, do something else with your time. Do something else. But I feel like the actors make it work. Sometimes you have protagonist and you have a second lead. In this case, the protagonist of the film is Emma. It is Madeline Stowe's character. And you see immediately why she's drawn to him, because he's nice, because he's competent. The other thing that this film does, which is a little bit daring, Aidan Quinn's character is not presented as that great of a guy. She's just really hot for him. And then he kind of shows a little bit more humanity and genuine concern, more for her even than himself. The story humanizes him. If you want to say the amount of sex they have somehow humanizes him, I mean, I can't really take issue with that. It's possible. But what I was saying before about the timing of this movie's release, as I've said, and for those of you who are new to the channel and haven't heard me kind of lecture on this part of it before, generally speaking, films of very high quality don't get, or at least in the old days, don't get a major release in January. It's usually not done. And if one of them happens to hit at this time in the first couple of months, it's going to make a lot of money. And I don't know if people were sort of fatigued from Basic Instinct, Fatal Instinct, the spoof of Basic Instinct, which I believe had already come out, Final Analysis with Richard Gere, Consenting Adults with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio and Kevin Kline. I don't know if there was an erotic thriller fatigue, but this movie, I don't think that it was marketed correctly. I feel like there was an angle where they could have gotten more people into the seats if they had promoted it as it's pretty much of a horror film. You could call this a horror film and you wouldn't necessarily be wrong, even if it doesn't follow the complex discovery plot precisely. There are people not sure in the world of the story, is this a serial killer situation or is this not a serial killer situation? And it looked like Madeline Stowe was going to be a bigger star than she ended up becoming. She had this movie where, I mean, Michael Apted frames her magnificently. And I remember, I think it was Owen Gleiberman in Entertainment Weekly who, in as tasteful a way as possible, he thought the movie was just okay. I want to say he gave it either a B or a B minus. Entertainment Weekly didn't do a star rating or thumbs up. They graded it as if it was a class paper. He said he thought she was the most beautiful woman working in Hollywood. He said he didn't even think it was close. And he loved the way that she was framed in the world of this film. But she had this, and later the same year she had Bad Girls with, well, at the time, a very young Drew Barrymore, among others. And that film just didn't quite hit. And the thing is, and we know this, female stars in Hollywood have less rope. They can have less box office bombs and still stay on the A-list. You saw what happened not long after this with Demi Moore, who was headlining major, huge budget films, The Scarlet Letter, The Juror, and Striptease. Geez, I almost forgot that. where she got paid big money. Well, in that case, all three of those films, they all pretty much tanked. Although The Juror may have come close to breaking even, but that movie, if it succeeds, it's because Alec Baldwin is completely out of control as the villain called the Teacher. He's like a assassin, but you don't get as much. You don't get as much leeway. And somebody like Bruce Willis had a number of box office bombs, but he also had a number of hits. He had a little bit more rope. So Madeline Stowe, I don't think headlined any more movies after the 1995 era. And it's unfortunate because she had a really good screen presence, a really strong screen presence, and she was committed to the bit in this film. She made me believe, if I didn't know who she was, she comes across like somebody who can't see. She must have done a lot of research, and the way that she was using her hands and the vibration and all of these kinds of things, the movie takes great pains to make her character believable, both before and after she has the power of sight. The film doesn't quite go in a conventional route. There are a lot of surprises in the final, third of the film. And you can see that Michael Apted he didn't want to make a standard film in any of the genres. He was trying to make it feel as real and grounded as possible. This doesn't have anything that approaching supernatural elements or anything that doesn't seem grounded. It's not as much of a police procedural as, let's say, Zodiac, which obviously deals with horrible serial killings. But there is clearly an attempt to make it feel like this could happen. The least likely thing in the story is the way that Emma's sight gets restored by this surgery, which, if it were that easy, people would have already, they would have already done it. So Hollywood, even with the disappointment of this film, did continue to pump out erotic thrillers. You had the really lousy Madonna film with Joe Mantegna, terrific cast, Willem Dafoe, Body of Evidence. That's the worst of all. Final Analysis with Richard Gere, Kim Basinger, and Uma Thurman, not a good movie, but Final Analysis is Citizen Kane compared to Body of Evidence. Basic Instinct, a movie I don't really think is very good, huge hit, but you ask me, is it a good movie now? It's 2.5 stars. Entertaining, though. Body of Evidence is the worst of the erotic thrillers that Hollywood made. But when William Friedkin made Jade the following year, as I said, with Chaz Palminteri and Linda Fiorentino playing the femme fatale, that also bombed. So Hollywood just kept going to the same well. And this movie somehow is under the radar, and it's a film that, when I talked about this being a dual episode, this to me is the best movie you've never seen. This is the newest entry. Who really cares what day this movie came out? Came out 31 years ago. But I will stand on business that in the suspense thriller horror realm, this is by far the best movie you've never seen. Because if you're under 40, it's very unlikely. This film has never been free on Netflix. To my knowledge, it has never been free on any streaming service. Yeah, you can get it for a couple of bucks on Amazon Prime. But it is gripping the whole way through. And you really don't know how the hell it's going to turn out because it's straddling so many different genres. It's not playing by the rules of any one genre because it's all over the place, but somehow the threads of this type of movie, that type of movie, this type of movie, that type of movie, they all coalesce into a really effective whole. For me, this is a 3.5 star out of 4 movie. I always went with the old school 4-star method because most of, and Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, when they weren't doing this, Ebert's reviews in the Chicago Sun-Times, he always used a 4-star system. And the New York newspapers, Newsday, the Post, the Daily News, they also used a best out of 4 system. So I still think in terms of that and not out of 5, and some people do out of 10. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not upset if I see somebody doing it differently, but 3.5 stars out of 4 is how I would rate this. It is not on the upper echelon. This isn't 7, but I will say it is better than Basic Instinct and any of the other erotic thrillers that I mentioned here. I don't know that I necessarily forgot too many, but Consenting Adults has, not surprisingly, a very strong Kevin Spacey performance, but Kevin Kline kind of seems miscast, and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio has nothing to do. And this film takes full advantage of Aidan Quinn's ability to play somewhat unlikable characters, but still make you care. I've always felt that he was vastly underrated as a film actor. Don't love his performance in Legends of the Fall, but I don't really think that movie is that great. Brad looks great. Anthony Hopkins looks great. I've never really been a fan of that film. Was it Julia Ormond who played the woman? Not that good. But Aidan Quinn, he did the film with Liam Neeson called Unknown in 2011. You know, that should have sucked, but it was actually, I saw that in theaters. I thought it was really good. Liam plays a doctor in Europe. It's a little bit of a similar setup to Harrison Ford with Frantic in 1988. He plays a doctor in Europe who somehow loses his memory, and then when he wakes up, a character played by Aidan Quinn pretends to be him. And it's like a mistaken identity, and did this guy lose his memory, or what the fuck's going on? As mindfuck movies go, it's really good. One other thing I want to point out about Aidan Quinn, this is a bit notorious. My sister went to SUNY New Paltz. Aidan Quinn also went to SUNY New Paltz. And she graduated in June of 2005. My sister walked with the SUNY New Paltz class of 2005. And I found out ahead of time, I don't remember who told me, it was probably my sister, that Aidan Quinn was going to be the commencement speaker because he had gone to New Paltz. And I was excited. We were going to have good seats, going to be a couple of 100 feet away from an actor I've admired since the 80s. This is great. So Aidan Quinn went up there to give the commencement speech. And when I tell you the first 10 minutes, he was amazing. The laugh lines were perfect. He actually hadn't graduated. He kind of saw himself as an academic slacker. He got lucky to have the career he did even up to that point in the movie business. And he was great. But all of a sudden, kind of went off. Well, I don't think he went off script. He went off script for what the audience was willing to tolerate. After 10 minutes of having us eating out of his hand, he went on an anti-globalization rant. This is 2005, mind you. He went on an anti-globalization rant that had the booze raining down. I mean, I thought he was going to tell us to stop breathing oxygen. Like, it was unbelievable. He went from telling funny stories about his career and how much he appreciated academics and how he always regretted the fact that he didn't graduate from SUNY New Paltz, and look at how many of you have done better than me. All of that stuff was great. And then he goes on this anti-globalization rant. Like half the kids in attendance, I shouldn't say kids, half of the graduates were in financial areas. New Paltz was known for their, really good business school. So he is getting booed. And when I tell you, my mom was embarrassed. My dad, may he rest in peace, he was turning red. He couldn't believe it. And I was sitting there just giggling away. It was epic. It was epic because nobody could have imagined that he was going to be so good and then end up getting drowned in booze. He got drowned in booze, and he had to wrap up his remarks. And he got like a half-hearted couple of claps, but there were people still shouting, obscenities at him as he left the stage. Man, you got to know your audience. You got to know your audience. You got to know your crowd. And honestly, the graduates just wanted to have a nice graduation. They didn't want to be lectured about globalization from an actor. And it was incredible, absolutely incredible. So the funny part was, he said a couple of things during this rant that I don't think people took issue with. They were just mad that he decided to get on a soapbox at that particular moment. So he said something to the effect of, please shop local and buy from mom and pop type stores. That was the last thing he said. And hey, I don't have a problem with that. That's all great. My sister didn't come home with us right away. She stayed up there. And she called. We talked on the phone the day after this. And she said, hey, you're not going to believe who I saw in Starbucks. Well, I don't know. Who did you see in Starbucks? She shouts, Aidan Quinn. So Aidan Quinn didn't even do what he said in that moment. He was so desperate for Starbucks, he did not go to the 3 mom and pop coffee shops in New Paltz. He went to a Starbucks. Or maybe he had already gone there and he decided to spread the business. I don't know. My sister just thought it was funny that Aidan Quinn ended up in a Starbucks after he was basically ranting against Starbucks. He didn't say Starbucks, but it seemed like he was taking issue with it. Absolutely unbelievable. The first and only time that I've been at a commencement, and I've been at a bunch, where somebody got booed. It's really not that uncommon. If you're going to make any kind of a political, point or philosophical, you run the risk of pissing off certain people. But it felt like 95% of the gallery, including the parents, just wanted the guy to stop. Just knock it off. Nobody's interested in this. Come on. You were doing so good. But alas, that was a kind of a rainy day also, and put a damper on it. But it is a great memory. And I don't hold it against him. It made it more entertaining. Rather than what could have just been canned, phony remarks, he gave us a window into what his thinking was in 2005. The peanut gallery didn't like it. They, metaphorically speaking, they were throwing tomatoes at him, and he wrapped up his remarks. But I digress, as I often do. You get going on a topic, right? It all starts rolling along. The movie Blink, though, as I said, is not available to stream for free anywhere. But I give this my highest recommendation. This is a movie I don't know anyone who has seen it who has not said some version of, wow. It was scary. I didn't know who the killer was. I didn't know how the main characters were going to get out of the situations they were in. And the sex scenes work. It's very difficult to do it with recognizable actors to where it doesn't seem absurd. I got to be honest with you. I didn't think the sex scenes between Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone really worked in Basic Instinct. Oddly enough, the best sex scene in the film is the one where Michael Douglas pretty much destroys Jeanne Triplehorn's probably $2,000 or $3,000 outfit so that he can get with her. And no offense to Michael Douglas's Nick Curran, bro, he only lasted about 11 seconds. As Henry Cavill says in the Zack Snyder Justice League, when Darkseid tries to use that sword on him and it does nothing to Superman? Not impressed. It was a good scene, but I wasn't impressed with Michael Douglas in Basic Instinct in that one moment. Well, his character anyway. But Blink, released on this day 31 years ago, a suspense thriller, a serial killer thriller, an NC-17 level erotic thriller with two really attractive leads and a fantastic filmmaker in Michael Apted at the helm, released 31 years ago today, the newest entry in our continuing series of the best movie you've never seen. This has been episode number 416 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday morning here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.